we really have from the beginning been trying to do four things. Really sort of sharpen and promote key ideas about youth development, about what youth success looks like, and about how we can really hold leaders to have shared accountability for their progress, really focusing on building the capacity of change-oriented leaders to do this work, starting by thinking differently. And we call them boundary spanners, and that's great. And then we really sort of zoom in to say, if you're really boundary spanners and you're trying to do change, what do we know about change management? What do we know about managing change, especially when you're trying to influence change in things that you don't exactly control? We do this locally, and we've done this nationally. We go back and forth in terms of which one we lead with over time, but these really have been the strategies behind the work as we put the forum together. But what's important to know is that these strategies and their inception really predate the co-founding of the Forum for Youth Investment and go way back to when Merita actually joined me at the Center for Youth Development and Policy Research. And I had the pleasure of serving with Milbury McLaughlin on the Carnegie Commission on Adolescent Development, where A Matter of Time came out and was looking for a senior researcher, and Milbury said, without a doubt, you have to talk to Merita. So thinking that Milbury is brilliant, I talked to Merita, and Merita joined us at the Center for Youth Development in 1994. She may correct me, she usually corrects my dates. But we really had this whirlwind experience of, she joined in 94. Several months later, we had an opportunity to go start this President's Crime Prevention Council in the White House. She came along with me to get that started. That didn't last very long. We then took our ideas internationally into the International Youth Foundation, did that for a while, had an opportunity with America's Promise to bring those lessons about how we do policy and practice and partnership work, brought that back into the US through what was originally called IYF US. And then as that work really grew to the point that we needed a new organization for it, we created the Forum. All of that happened in about the span of 4.5 years. So as I turn to Merita, I have to turn with first enormous gratitude that she hung in there through the first 5 years, through that many transitions. Second, that she's still with us as the co-founder of the Forum. But I want to just start by saying, Merita, clearly you didn't sign up to get 5 jobs in 4 years when you came to join me at the Center for Youth Development. What was it that attracted you to this work in the beginning?
Thank you, Karen. And it's going to be kind of fun to have this conversation today, since I got to interview you a couple of months ago as you were just making this transition. So delighted to be here, delighted to have folks joining us for afternoon tea. I've been thinking about this as a little bit of this kind of trip down memory lane is happening at this time that we have just been through this incredible, momentous year where there's been a lot of time for reflection. And there's a lot of time to think about how the roots of the work really are all carried forward into the work that we're doing today. So as we kind of zoom back, I'm like, what made it attractive in the first place? Was that the question? And why hang in? I came, before I worked with you, there was a time, pre-Karen, where I was an 8th grade teacher. I was a youth worker. I actually had an organization, an after-school program called the Culture Club that met in the local library in East Palo Alto, which is also where I taught at 8th grade. I was a researcher on the work with Milbury and Shirley Bryce Heath at Stanford that was on urban sanctuaries, and it really was starting with the same questions I think that we've been seeing in this past year. Is with the urban sanctuaries work, what we were really interested in exploring was we get a sense of just how important schools are in the lives of young people. Families, critically important, and we've been seeing that more than it's been even more visible in this past year. But also community organizations, community-based organizations that work with young people. What did those look like? This was 25 plus 30 years ago when we started this work, sorry. And it was just like, what really makes them tick? And so I actually got to hang out for 5 years in youth organizations in Chicago, in Cabrini Green, and Logan Square, Greater Humboldt Park, in Fort Worth, in the Bay Area, a little bit in Pittsburgh as well. And we were just trying to figure out both what made them work for young people, but also what needed to be happening in the community around them to help those organizations be strong, and what kind of role they played in just helping young people navigate the realities that they found themselves in. So that was my grounding and my my roots in this work. Always interested in that combination of what happened inside of schools, but what was happening in community based organizations, and what was and how did that really connect in with families. So coming to work with you, I didn't know it. I don't know if you remember this. It was February 22nd of 1994. And my first day on the job, you said, we have this proposal due to Carnegie by Friday. Can you write it? I didn't know that was actually a proposal to pay for my job. It turned out that it was actually a proposal to pay for this work on school community partnerships that we did with Michelle Cahill. It was really looking at the range of kind of school community partnerships that were kind of in play at that time and why they were central to making this kind of work happen. So that was perfect. That was a perfect, drop in terms of the work. And the other big project, again, I think about this in both this cross-system work we do and then also the deep dive, it's just really understanding community organizations well, is this work that we called the monograph. It was with Chapin Hall. It was, I think, 115 youth serving organizations across the country that you had pulled together all this information, and you needed a typology. And you said, tell me how these things all hang together. And I remember this much like the proposal for the school community partnerships work. I remember this as like my second all-nighter when I was working for you, where I thought I have to have this done by tomorrow morning. And I spread out all these organizations on it, and I made this giant matrix, and then brought it into you the next day and laid it out on the giant conference table and said, I think this is how these things hang together. This is what they're about. This is what they do. This is what they have in common. And you said, okay, cool. And then we wrote through that. It was the people, places, possibilities. But I will say that is where I came up with one of the pieces of advice that I give to almost all new staff members as they come on board. Sometime in your first 2 to 3 months, make a matrix for Karen, and she will love it. Show us multiple dimensions in the work, and then we'll see what we can do with it.
Yes.
So those were the hooks when I first started.
Those were absolutely the hooks, and those were the two very ambitious projects that you cut your teeth on at the forum. And I'll flag that, I think you were truly, or at the center, I think you were at the center maybe 5 months before we made the transition. So it was really pretty quick but significant work. And I think that just as you said, Merita, in some ways we've really come full circle back around to these questions with much more sophistication, with much more understanding of how learning happens, with a whole lot more data, and a lot more willingness and understanding on the part of schools to think about these partnerships in more strategic ways. But we're right back again at these questions of how do you make these organizations more visible? How really do they hang together as an informal system, as increasingly formal systems that support young people? How are they not just optional, but really a critical part of young people's learning experience? And what is the best way for them to work with schools in this complementary way?